just needs to be turned up a little bit. We need some
more.
We need some more of that Drawn to Fantasy sweet vibes.
Do it.
I'm doing it.
Crank it up.
It's been a couple weeks.
It's been a couple weeks, Ange.
Drawn to Fantasy.
We are drawn to fantasy. Yes.
Escape reality. Who needs reality right now?
No, not when we have dragons, drawing dragons. Drawing dragons with Carolyn Pagan and Mark Hodge.
Connor Wong, who just recently won a jump prize.
That's right. And Melissa Valaket. FedEx John is here. And so is Emily C. Martin. Don't forget Linda H. Granger and Tanya Rose. All right, Ange.
Yes.
Happy New Year's. Happy New Year's, everyone.
Is it really, though?
It's another year.
I think I'm just calling it New Year.
Yeah, here we are in COVID times. I'm Tony DiTerlizzi, a slightly out of breath Tony DiTerlizzi, just because I've the last few weeks I've been exercising or trying to exercise because I have really tried to push myself into Jabba the Hutt type shape and form during the pandemic. It's been one of my goals.
I just want to interrupt for a second because I always look for what the music is going to go into. This was unintentional because I typed in The Hobbit.
Uh-huh.
And then this next... are you familiar with this tune?
Hobbit Rockin' the Shire. I think, is that what's playing? I think we are.
This is right now, we're
rocking the Shire. I think we should be rocking the Shire. I'm drawing this is a New Year's gram. 2021. Here's hoping we'll have a better year. Certainly in the United States of America. It's been an interesting week, to say the very least. But we're not here to talk about politics, and we're not here to talk about the news. We are here to offer a diversion through pen, paper, and pencil. That's what I've come to realize means the most to me, and that I can offer to you. I'm excited to be here. Ange had thrown a hook out into the group, the Drawn to Fantasy group, and said, what do you think Tony should draw this week? Because we were kind of up in the air. I thought you did, didn't you?
No,
throw a hook and ask him to nibble on, give me ideas?
We were all talking about it.
Oh, you were talking.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that was the conversation, but...
So Ange said we should draw D&D. There was a lot of requests for drawing Dungeons and Dragons today, which I thought was fine. I have no problem. I love drawing Dungeons and Dragons. Now, normally I would run to the Monster Manual, which is probably what most people know me for, and certainly Planescape would have been a good thought. In fact, I think we'll do a deep dive into Planescape in an upcoming episode. Certainly on the heels of the podcast that I did this week. If you missed it, I was a guest on Dragon Talk, which is the Wizards of the Coast Dungeons & Dragons official podcast. I blathered on about myself. This is me and my head blathering on, talking about... I'll have little earplugs. Talking about Planescape and D&D and my new book, my latest book, Kenny and the Book of Beasts. And you can catch that. I put a link up on the site. If not, we'll post a link and share it. It's on YouTube. Greg Tito and Shelley Mazanoble did a terrific job. Were great questions, and I look forward to chatting with them again. But Dungeons and Dragons, I thought it would be interesting to actually go all the way back in time to this. This is a Advanced Dungeons and Dragons box set called Dragon Mountain, and it holds a very special place in my heart because it is the first commercial illustration job I got after college, right out of art school. This came out, I believe, in 1993, Wait for it. This 1993 is when it came out. I had been submitting artwork samples to TSR, the publishers of Dungeons & Dragons, right out of art school for the course of the year from the moment I graduated onwards, and had been rejected repeatedly. And then when I finally got a gig, guys, this is what I got. They assigned all these books to me. I was thinking I would get like a simple adventure module, but instead there it is. They spelled my name right. Pretty nice. I got to do this, which of course now I can't see. Here's some of the art from this adventure. It was a lot of art, and to be completely honest, I hardly knew what I was doing. And that's actually what I wanted to talk to you all about a little bit today before we dig in and draw. Here's a couple color plates. This was one of the pieces that caught the eye of I believe the editor designer for the Monster Manual that would let me eventually do the Monster Manual. You can see I've Knoll Society, ogres, orcs, things like that. I believe this was an enchanted painting, and if you sat down in the chair, you got trapped in the painting like this fighter and this wizard. Dragon Mountain was incredibly exciting because the paycheck I received, Ange, was probably one of the biggest I'd ever seen.
I also feel like when I met you, you had just completed Dragon Mountain.
Or, no, probably the Monster Manual, no?
Well, you had Dragon Mountain.
Was out
because I remember taking it to one of my coworkers, and I was like, look at this guy. He's got a real job.
Kind of. Sort of. I'm not going to bore you with 9 million sketches, but what I'm going to focus on today is a little bit of the sketch work that happened. Actually, the majority of the sketches are in a sketchbook that are not here in the studio. They're actually at the Norman Rockwell Museum. The DiTerlizzi Never Abandon Imagination exhibition is sitting in rest, I think is what they call it, right, Ange?
Yep.
Waiting its next stop, which...
Because pen and ink work
needs
to have a little rest.
Yeah, the sunlight and light will affect it. So these are sketches from, I'm going to guess, late 1992, early 1993. I'm hoping I can find a date on one of these guys. And I might not. And then I'm going to move forward and show you something. You can see here's a little thumbnail of a scene. Very Frazetta with a pretty cool mustache.
Very fancy tools there you used. Was that like a Bic pen?
That is like a ballpoint pen. I'm literally figuring it out. Now look at this, Ange. Here's where I spend all the time designing the kobold. There were kobolds in Dragon Mountain, and here's where I definitely spent extra energy kind of figuring out. And I do remember part of the art order was that the kobolds were a different breed than the usual kobold variety. I don't know why. So there's a color sketch.
It's almost 30 years old.
Yeah, it is probably 30 or 29. It's actually got an obligatory coffee spill. That is not intentional. That really happened. There's another head study, but it was definitely thinking of a pug and a bat, kind of a predecessor to Hog Squeal when I look at it now. 1992. There's this scriggle is actually my old signature, and there's the date. There's a 92. So here we are. Yeah, 29 years ago.
Wow. Older than probably many of you watching right now.
Probably. So you can see here how that translated into the final illustration. There's the final illustration that would have been reproduced in the book of the kobold. Actually, I like more of the stuff happening on this guy than on this guy, but we're going to get to that. Ange.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a quick slideshow of some of the pieces that I was always fond of from this book. This was a new
What media was the
monster. The color one would have been a combination of art markers, which you can see if you look on the back. You can see those alcohol-based art markers. So think of a Copic or something along the lines of that right now. That's probably what it was done in. These would have been Prismacolor markers, which actually I believe they still sell. And probably, I'm going to guess one of these two pens, either a Pilot Precise or a Sharpie Fine Point. I'm thinking the Pilot Precise is probably what it was. And it has my secret sauce. It's got a little bit of, it looks like gouache dry brush on it. You can see that on his shirt in the wrinkles. You can see that little bit of dry brush going on his shirt there. And certainly for the little dots. And a little bit of pastel pencil. I still have the actual set that I used 200 years ago, Ange. They're here because I'm a pack rat. They were bought at Easel Art Supply down in Florida. These Conte pencils, pastel pencils, were used for both the color pieces in Dragon Mountain and the Monstrous Manual, which I would do the following year. So I've showed you a couple of the things. There's a very highly influenced by Brian Froud fairy, which I think was specifically asked for. Here's a scene of a thief looking at some pictographs, and not too bad of an action scene here. A fighter or a thief fighting.
I thought it was interesting because so many of the characters looked like you.
They kind of do. It's funny.
I totally looked like you when I met you.
Here's a monk or a priest or something reading a bit of the map. Here's the finish on the Water Lord Fiend, which was inspired by a viper fish, and the kobold. So I don't... Unfortunately, these guys don't have dates on them, but I'm guessing they're 93.
93.
Yep, 93. Here we go. Oh, look at that. January, actually, of 1993 is when I worked on these.
January what?
January 23rd, so probably close to it. Now, those were some of the not bad ones. Now I'm going to show you some of the crappy ones, Ange. I'm going to show you some of the ones that aren't so great. Because...
Yes, we do keep all of the art in sleeves now.
We do, so my fingerprints, and especially if I'm going to be doing a demonstration and I want to grab it, and I've got graphite, or... Actually, I just, before the show started, I put moisturizer on my hands. Badger. No, this time of year my fingers crack and bleed, so that's the last thing you guys want to see up close while I'm drawing for you is my nasty fingers. So certainly need it now. They're all in sleeves. So here's the you saw the sketch of this one earlier. Let me see if I can find the sketch. And here's the finish. And I blew it on it. I think the guy's face is terrible. It looks like Hulk. Not very good.
Bulky.
Overworked. She's okay, I guess. The guy in the back just doesn't even want to be in the picture. He's just like, why?
You would say it was overworked, too.
It's definitely overworked. I was in over my head on this book. No question about it. And some of the art, a majority of the art suffered. I wouldn't even say some. I'd say the majority of the art suffered. And I want you to see it. I want you to understand that it didn't always go perfect, and there was always room for improvement for someone like me. Look at this. This is an avalanche. And some cauliflower clouds. But, I mean, I don't even know if I used reference. It looks like I didn't. This is a terrible illustration.
I love that there's just really one rock for each of them.
There's one for each of them. This is not good. This is not good. The horse is just upset that it's even drawn that badly.
Penny says she thinks it still looks epic.
Oh, thank you, Penny. You're very, very sweet. It's interesting. Now, I'm looking at the date on this one. This one's February, so this must be near the end of the deadline. So my hunch is I probably drew all the stuff I really liked up first, and then I got to the end and went, oh, my God, what have I signed up for? Here's another one. This is the classic Cell Dungeons & Dragons. Always has dungeons. So here's the dungeon. This is from 1993, so this must be also near the end. This is also terrible. It's like a bad Doom video game. It's just so strange. The perspective is...
Put a lot of focus on that ceiling.
Well, here's the thing, Ange. Because I didn't know what I was... What happens often is if you know it's wrong, but you're too... much of an amateur, frankly, to know that it's not right, you start overworking it to compensate. So for me, it's covering up with hatch marks and scratches to try to make it more visually interesting. But if I put a piece of tracing paper over this and just drew the bones of it, which I think we need to do, you're going to see what a crappy drawing that is. Here's my Boulet. I got to draw a Boulet on the first project, a classic D&D monster. Here he is, coming out of the ground. They encounter him underground in a tunnel, a boule, and I've got him like smacking meatballs at him. It just looks like bad shepherd. There's a lot of good stuff happening. Like, I don't know if I'm consciously going, this axe is going to point right at the boule. That's pretty good. There's a guy here lost. There's a lot of roots.
We have scale issues.
A lot of scale issues. There's no atmosphere. I didn't understand how to create depth and atmosphere in pen and ink yet. And there are masters of that. But I didn't understand how to do that. Yes, that is land shark. So, also even some of the other creatures, like this is a wolf with bat wings. Pretty stock D&D monsters.
Horrible.
He's not horrible, but his mouth is just, and the face is not.
Long face.
Why the teeth that hang over drives me nuts. So I thought, Ange, today I'm actually going to address some of these not so great drawn ones. We'll look back at them, we'll critique them, and I'll take a stab at trying to what I would teach. Let's see, 1993, 23. I wouldn't have turned 24 yet. 23-year-old Tony. Let's go back in time and see if we can teach him a thing or two about drawing. I'm going to do this. Normally, I would have gathered loads of reference, but right now we're going to go with my 50-year-old gathered knowledge. I think.
Which one are you going to do?
What do you guys think? What's this one's definitely just hurts. Let's start with the thing that I thought was good as my warm-up, Ange. I'm just going to start with the thing I thought was good as my warm-up, which was this kobold. Now, I liked it, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the kobold because I want to get onto some of the actual.
Somebody mentioned Doom, which is the video game Doom, which was super popular at the time, and it looks like, yeah, I think, sometimes, just like art or music or anything else, it's reflective of the time period, of the era in which it was created. So I could definitely see that. It's
and that has a lot of. That's important to think about, especially culturally. So we tend to sometimes pluck visual artists. I'm only going to speak about visual artists out of the era that they created their art with. I remember there was quite a bunch of people upset with Dr. Seuss and some of his racially insensitive drawings of characters. But if you were to go back into the era when he was doing that art, it would not have been viewed as insensitively. And thank goodness we're all evolving into a better, more kinder society where we can call that. But I think to go back in time and wag a finger is a little problematic. I think it's just a moving forward type thing. So,
absolutely. And just with our art, we are learning from past mistakes.
Yes. So I'm gonna. I was looking for that color sketch of the goblin. Oh, what the heck I did with it? Hold on. And we'll get started on here. Oh, here he is. All right, color goblin. So we had the color goblin and a bunch of sketches of the goblin, but I'm going to just work this. We have the color goblin, and this was the finished goblin that made it into the book. I'm going to put the color one away, and I'm just going to focus on this finished one and what I would do differently and where it needs work. So I'm going to put him here. Hopefully he won't have a glare on him. Great.
You want to take him out this sleeve?
No, I think he's okay. I think he's got no glare. I think he's good. He's there. He's right there. Okay. I'm using a number 2 pencil today, guys. Nothing fancy. Just a good old number 2 Ticonderoga pencil. And so one of the things I want to focus on first actually is... All right, yeah, I'm taking him out of the sleeve. Sorry. You're right.
All right.
Hopefully my greasy fingertips... Yeah, that's much better. You guys can see him a little better, right? And I put a little piece of scrap here for inking, although I don't know if we'll get to it today. So the first thing I want to do is the old trick that I've talked about before, which is, what does this guy look like in reverse? So I'm going to turn on my heart light, and we're going to flip it over, and we're going to zoom in on that. Look at that weird mouth. Look at that weird, crooked, bizarro mouth that's going on. Hands not bad. That's not pretty good. Probably a little big, but probably drawn from life. There's some little bit of wrinkling going on. Not bad. It looks like I knew what the light source was. Looks like the light source is coming from here and going this way. So that's pretty good. The ears are off a little bit here. There's this a problem that would take me about 10 years to figure out. I'd say the perspective on the shield's a little off. He's got it tilted up. In fact, there's really not a whole lot of perspective in this piece. And it's evident here when you see these cords or things that would tie his tunic up are just completely straight across. So this is
Does he put his little bandana on every day, or does he just sleep in it?
I think he sleeps in it. Kobolds, I think, probably sleep in that little bandana. Yeah.
Is he losing some hair, and maybe he doesn't want to show.
No, think of it.
Kobolds, no.
Think about it more like Survivor, Ange. Think about it like that's his buff. It's his buff. It's his tribal buff. Yes. I just saw one of my old childhood friends, Angela. Suzette St. Ange has just signed on. I've known Suzette since middle school. What? Hi, Suzette. I hope you're doing well. Anyway, let's get back to this guy. So we've seen some of the problems that we can identify that could use some work by simply just flipping the piece over, something I failed to do back in 1993, Ange. So we're going to try to remedy some of that.
You were so busy, you're like, I don't even have time to flip it over.
Bear in mind, I was not living in an apartment. I was living at, this would have been done in my old bedroom at my mom and dad's.
But you didn't have this light table.
That's what I'm going to go with that. That's why I didn't do it, Ange. I didn't have the light table yet to be able to do it properly. I would have had my old drawing desk, which is now owned by my brother, Adam. All right, so let's start with the structure of this guy's head, and that's going to help us out a little bit. So his head's pretty square if we look at it. If we just look at like the basic design of this, I'm seeing a square, right? If I put a thing, I don't think I need to do it. So I'll stick with the square. I don't want to change too much. Again, I think I was probably thinking of a pug or a bat. I don't think we had Goblin, our pug, yet, but certainly I had pugs on the mind. I'm going to just come up with a jaw here. I'm going to do a center line on it, and we can build from this. I put a little back of his skull here. The other thing I didn't have, which I now have, thanks to my unbelievably amazing wife, is something like this. It's amazing what you can buy on eBay, including a real human skull.
Nothing says I love you like a human skull.
Why? It was supposed to go to science. This is not what I meant.
I'm the ghost of 2020. Turn back.
Turn back. Get in the DeLorean. Go further in time. You're not out of the woods yet, kids. Okay. All right. So here we go. We have it now. I like the triangle nose. That's kind of.
I'll get to your question in a few when Tony's taking a little break.
I'll do the triangle nose there. A little bit of that. Now this crazy wonky mouth. So now that we're seeing it a little bit, and again, not a whole lot of perspective going on here. I think now it really depends on how you want to view this. If you're like, this is a lowly kobold, I think the average kobold monster is 2.5, maybe 3 feet tall. So you could really push that by looking down at him, Ange. If you drew him like a square and you had his head low, and his nose, and so his eyes are looking up,
you can grab those skulls anywhere, guys. Grab one go on Amazon.
Go to your local and go to your local mortuary and ask them, is there anybody who's
already made.
So look, here's a very quick kind of looking down at it, and then I would use that perspective for the rest of them. So his shoulders, you would also look down at his shoulders, etc. When I did the Kobold in Realms, Ange, I wanted to look at this like a big, beautiful animal. So I actually went the other way. I actually tilted the head way up like this. I made it this majestic, like David, and so the Kobold's head was like this. He was like this big, majestic creature. So that just that alone, I didn't even understand that concept yet. No. And I'm sure it was taught to me. I'm sure at some point a professor or someone in drawing told it to me, but it went in one ear and right out the other because,
But this is also that example of, the thing that we've talked about so many times, which is making your characters do things and act. And that is like secondary to just learning anatomy and drawing.
Yes.
And learning how to actually draw the character first.
Yes. I don't think they'll be upset, but I'm actually working on quite a long feature article for Imagine FX with a lot of tips and pointers that I use when I begin my illustration work on a book. And there's a whole little section I wrote about getting characters to act, which, again, there's no acting going on here. It's just a pose. And we'll get to that as well. So, I mean, I think here I'm looking at his eyes. His eyes are kind of on like this. So you kind of can see the basic shapes of the face as they were kind of done back in 1993.
Jason Alona had a good question. I'm just going to pipe in with, if you were right out of art school, did you teach yourself these new techniques you're critiquing with?
Yes, through observation, conversation, and imitation. How's that for three? Yeah, so through, I don't even remember what I said. Through
conversation.
Through conversation, certainly talking to other artists about it. Observation, observing masters.
And imitation.
And then imitating those masters. And then, yes, imitation, which is what I was I can't spell, which was what I was going to do today, but I think we'll do a deeper dive in pen and ink. I think pen and ink warrants its own multi-episodic thing. We'll do a Masters of Pen and Ink, and then how my pen and ink style grew. So just kind of looking at what I did, you've got kind of an angry scowl. I'm going to say that's a scowl. I'm just going to go by what I drew. The ears would be most likely back here, which means if I draw the rest of this cube and drew that line, his other ear is probably roughly here, the base of that ear. So that ear is going to come out maybe to here. And then if we draw a line, then the other ear is going to be here. So can you give you an idea how that whole situation would work?
When's the Imagine FX article going to be out, Barbara?
Don't know yet. I'll give you guys, I'm still working on it, and I will give you an update as soon as I know. I don't hand it in until later in the month, so I'll keep you all posted. So here, there, now look at even the horns are on different things. Now, you know, if this was Hieronymus Bosch, he would have purposely made the horns what's the word I'm thinking of?
Symmetrical?
Thank you. Non-symmetrical. Asymmetrical. Yeah. But, you know, for the sake of doing this, I'm going to just draw a midline here on each of this to kind of give us a thing. And so the horns would, you know, if we have a thing, then one horn's here and one horn's here. I don't know if you guys were able to follow that. But basically, I took the cube of the square of his face and divided it to give me some kind of guideline, and then drew the horn here and the horn here, and then an axis on the top of his head, just so that I've got something to go by. Bosch may have, and even now, you know, he may have made one horn bigger. He may have made one horn twisted, just to give it a more, that asymmetry that Hieronymus Bosch used, I think helped show the depravity of the monsters and the demons, whereas humans were more perfectly symmetrical and, you know, perfection. So here we go. So let's, you know, I'm going to go less deep and just go, he broke his horn off in a battle, Ange.
Yeah, like
you know what I mean? Like they have these horns, but this guy broke it in a battle. I don't have a mirror right in front of me, but I probably would have at the time. So I'm going to do some scowl lines, some teeth, this chin. I've got a round chin. Now, the thing that's interesting here is, in general, especially if you're a big fan of animation, you'll note that in animation, sturdy and strong, unmoving characters or objects are drawn in squares. Think of the old man in Up, and he was nothing but squares, right? He was this kind of old, set in his ways kind of man. And I can't remember what his name was, but his cohort, his sidekick, who really changes him, Russell. I remember him. Everyone loves Russell. Guess what Russell was, Ange? He was nothing but circles. So that's, you know, that very simple shape language really does inform how we interpret things visually. I think it must start when we're children or infants probably, and our eyesight hasn't completely come into focus, so we're seeing a lot of things as almost like little blurry, shapes. So what's interesting here is I gave him, he's got a lot of rounds and some points. I would push the angular stuff a little more on him. So instead of this round chin, I think I would have stuck to a more squared off chin to make him more tough. That's just me. You may decide to do it a different way.
It's funny. Well, I also think, that roundness, when humans have round chins, right? There's that softness also that we just visually interpret, and
right.
also youth. So
yes.
as soon as like those angles start forming more and you're getting more chiseled, he looks already like he could be like the juvenile dude, and he looks more
gargoyle-y.
Yeah.
They're very gargoyle-y. I mean, I've been kind of pushing that kind of gargoyle-like thing. And it's not to say the whole thing should be completely constructed from squares or triangles or circles, but I think it's what's the overall silhouette and shape. So here you can kind of see I'm just pushing. Now, again, this is like a lump of clay, so I can go in and round the edges. It doesn't have to be so extreme. I can definitely, I like his ears are chewed and chipped.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's fun. The bandana doesn't actually, it could be askew. It doesn't have to be quite so perfectly. I think I was probably thinking of pirates and things like that when I was looking at him or drawing him, designing him. I'm just trying to see.
Shape language, yes.
Shape language. Not a term I have coined, but a term that is, I believe, may have originated with animation and animators because of...
I've seen that in Pixar, behind the scenes. I feel like a lot of the Pixar movies that we watch, they talk about that. They're like round, 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 round.
Yeah. So again, just kind of, now I'm hunching. I'm kind of playing that gargoyle even more, that little gargoyle pose. So I'm kind of hunching his back a little more. And you can kind of see where I'm going, where I'd go with it. So a little bit of just changing that, we could... there's different things with the mouth we could have done, Ange. I could have... Here he's got an underbite like a pug, so you could give him like the old snaggle tooth kind of thing, and just that's it, and just that, You could go the other way and give him an overbite. And that almost gives him, I'd say, like a child, because your chin is so underdeveloped when you're little, like a kid, that when you go this route and we take the chin way down, let's just do that. Let's just chop this chin off and give him an overbite. I want you guys to see how he goes from being kind of this tough gargoyle to being more this insolent little creature.
Yeah, because there's something about the guy on the left, right, where I feel like he looks ill-prepared. He looks like he's new to the job.
This guy, the old original guy.
Yeah, the original guy looks like he's like new to the job, and I really...
There's something about that you like.
Yeah.
This guy looks a little more... Well, that definitely... This lacks the humor. There's humor in this that this lacks. So what I'm focusing on right now is the underlying structure that's lacking here, because I wasn't even thinking of structure. I'm just like, I can draw a face. I can draw a thing. But now I understand the structure a little better. To imbue it with a little bit of humor... and certainly I would have been looking at Brian Froud, as evidenced by the one fairy that looks completely copied from Froud. Froud found humor in kind of squashing and scratching. So a Froudy face would almost be this. He does this kind of shape a lot. And then he would have done one eyebrow down, one eyebrow kind of up. This would be to push it into Froud, like more Froudy. And then he always did the one kind of big eye, kind of looking at you. Now I'm pushing it, obviously. This is extreme from what we're seeing. But if 50-year-old Tony could go back and show this to 20-year-old Tony, I think 20-year-old Tony would be like, yeah, more of that, kind of thing, and kind of finding the happy medium. So you can kind of see, again, that kind of just pushing it a lot harder. And Froud would, the thing would have this skinny little nothing body. It'd all be about this.
Kind of Gollum-y.
Yeah, making him a little more Gollum-like. Oh, sorry, here you go, so you guys can kind of see. Just taking the same shape and just interpreting it in a completely different way. So I think that's a good, but I think given, again, like here, he's kind of serious looking. So I feel like that's probably kind of closer to what I was thinking of. He has no back of a skull here. Also, I was really into these far apart eyes. I was definitely into breaking the eye. They are not an eye width apart. They are way beyond that. It was just a stylistic choice I was really, really into at the time. And it took me a little while to break it. I don't know where I got it from. Certainly I must have copied it from someone, but you can see the eyes are really far apart. So even again, if I was to... No.
Cobalt said, Cobalt looks new to the job because adventurers kill them so quickly.
Yeah, no kidding. So I'm just going to now I'm just going to do it gesturally. Now the mental structure is in my brain a little more. I'd almost have the other ear. So maybe that, again, that kind of frowdy, kind of more bat-like. And I'll try the eyes real far apart just to see if I can pull it off. The thing is, I don't know. I want to fill it with something, but let's see. It's almost more like a... I guess it is like a pug.
I was going to say.
And that's kind of interesting, too. If the eyes are not... they're kind of off. It's kind of fun, where the axis on them is not lined up. So this is now more entering. Again, I'm doing this without any
I was going to say,
animal.
Didn't warm up today.
Any animal reference, but this is definitely a much more creature-like kobold, which is probably. But we had to almost do those other ones to get there, Ange.
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of understand the structure and the. I do love that he has a bandana. Let's see if the bandana would be. I think it would almost be. Maybe just one horn. It's kind of. The axis, I think, is off a little bit. Let me just get that nose. And then let me attach. So the back of that skull's going here. The ribs in the beginning, the clavicles here. The center line's here. Here's the ribs. Arms are here. He's got fairly... Now, again, I'm not looking at silhouette. I would probably have drawn more silhouette. I do love the large hands. It's kind of fun. I'm just going to kind of... It needs another piece of the horn. I almost want to give it like little wisps. Almost make the shield too big, like it's well, it looks like it's a handmade shield that it's taken from something. Could be pilfered. Anyway, you get the idea. Here's a much more kind of creature featurey, dare I say, more Spiderwicky kind of where I would go with it. No earring, but it's funny. I would probably give it an earring to really push home the pirate-ness of it, or at least things that it's collected. Maybe rings around its arm or something that it's found in the dungeon.
Kevin Sylvester, hello.
Hi, Kevin.
Asked, does your hand feel more loose compared to the first drawing today?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's not. It's less my hand. It's my eye-hand coordination. Not 20. 2021. There we go. So a little bit of that on the kobold. Let's jump off of creatures and into something a little more significant. Definitely, this is driving me nuts. This is another. So this is a classic Dungeons and Dragons encounter. This is a boulet.
I can't help but always just say
Goulet, or Chevy Chase has the land shark. Hold on, just bear with me, folks. I'll get this guy back in his sleeve so I don't ruin him. And let's see if we can. Again, I'm going to try to do it without any reference, but that may prove problematic. I don't recall exactly the circumstances of where or when. Let's see, illustration 29. Let's see if we can find...
121.93.
Let's see if we can find where and when this boule showed up. Oh, I got lucky. Look, the bad boule is on the same page as the bad dungeon. How about that for awesomeness? Level 3, that's about what I am. I'm a level 50 artist now, and here I was probably a third level. Let's see, there's the boule. Torn clouds just found a potentially bigger problem. On the other hand, boule has made its way into the mountain, perhaps a quirk, and has recently emerged from the earth in the middle of the garden to terrorize the kobolds. Any movement on the surface of the ground of the garden attracts the boule in 2 rounds. Later, Clan Tornclaws, I'm guessing those are kobolds, have been avoiding walking through the area after several of its number were consumed. So we have, when the dwarves lived in Dragon Mountain, crops were grown here. Now Clan Tornclaw claims the area. Kobolds make very poor farmers. They planted some vegetable crops here, and despite their best efforts, some actually flourish in the fertile soil. Most of the crop goes to feed the cattle below, but some of the healthier-looking fare graces the plates of kings and clan leaders themselves. Clan Tornclaws makes its home almost entirely in the warrens rather than out in open fields. At this moment, blah, blah, blah. All right, so we shouldn't even be underground.
We should be in a garden.
We should be in a garden, and we should have a boule.
And did it say kobold guards? What was it?
No, it said the kobolds. My take is that the kobolds don't want to be near it because it's a problem. So
who are these dudes?
Those are the adventurers.
Ah, they've come upon the boule in
Now,
the garden.
to be fair,
A garden boule.
these things were sometimes moving targets. The art exactly what they wanted when it was ordered. So it could have been just like the art suggestion could have just been a boule bursts out of the ground and attacks adventurers. It could have been that simple.
28 years ago, yes. 28 years ago, Peter.
So what would I do differently? Well, first of all, I'd thumbnail the beans out of this thing. I do like the idea of the fighter kind of leading us in with his weapon. I think that's kind of fun. That shows a lot of like ready to action. The thing when you're illustrating for Dungeons and Dragons is you're showing possible outcomes, but you're not showing the outcome, right? You're just showing what could happen, what may happen, what might happen, but also what may not happen. We could point to the boule with a shield and a weapon, maybe a spear. So here's our guy.
This is no different in its process than when you get a manuscript.
Not really, no, except that you actually have more freedom with Dungeons and Dragons because your imagination can kind of fill in like, well, this might happen or this might happen. So it's very different than this is what happened. Dorothy put on the shoes and clicked them 3 times. Okay, well, I need to draw Dorothy with the shoes on or whatever. You know what I mean? This is Dorothy entered the room and the shoes were on a podium.
Right.
What do you do? So I'm just going to do some little thumbnails. Like I said, I do like this. I think clearly they need more than one adventurer. There's something about it underground which is fun and kind of cramped, and that's okay. We can kind of play with that. If that's the case, I'm going to take this and this opposite and use it to focus us towards the monster. So I'd probably have the hole this way with the monster coming out this way. Here's the monster. And you can see it's very realistically drawn. So, again, the monster... So there's something kind of fun, Ange, about it being if we did keep it underground for whatever reason, it's a very cramped quarters, which would make for fun gaming. You could... Now, all this perspective... I don't know how big a boule is, but it's a big monster. I don't think they're small. I think they're pretty ginormous. Oh, it actually told us, didn't it? Oops, sorry. I bumped the... It's going to tell us here how big the boule is. Where did I think I passed? Oh, level 3. Oh, there it is. It is not telling me. Size large. Thanks. Okay. So the other thing, I could adjust the perspective, have the fighter closer. Maybe here's the back of the fighter's head. Here's his helmet. Here's his shield. Here's his drawn sword or what have you. And maybe get somebody else in here, a wizard, something like that. And have our monster here. It's very cramped.
Okay, so
I'm playing on the idea of a much more claustrophobic encounter. It's very tight. So now I'm going to try a pan out. I'm going to pan out a little more.
I was just reading about boulets, and it did say they were extremely dangerous, burrowing unseen beneath soil before erupting at an unexpected moment to seize their prey.
Right, so it comes up out of the ground like Tremors, if any of you are old enough to remember the film Tremors. So the other thing is to completely rethink the entire scene, have them outside. Okay, so our main action then is the monster bursting out of the ground. That's the main thing we need to show, right? So let's do it like Jaws. Let's literally draw this thing coming out of the ground.
I like that.
Like Jaws, all right? So it's coming out of the ground. It's, it's barely out of the ground, but it's caught someone in its mouth.
It's a great story, though. I mean, you're like out, you're a little, critter, whatever your creature is out there in the garden, or you're adventurers and you're hungry and you stumbled upon a garden.
Right.
And you're going to maybe steal a few veggies and boom.
Right. So you could have these kind of, they're like in a corn maze essentially, right? This kind of thing. I mean, would be kind of fun.
It's cool. I like that.
So that's, if you guys, there's kind of the idea. So that's not its eye. That's a poor hapless person being eaten. Its eye's here. The other thing is you could have it completely out of the ground and chasing them through the corn maze, like a rhino, like an angry rhino, because they do come out of the ground. So that's another thought. So I would have it, however a rhino charges. And then you've got, and what's kind of fun here is you could have the rows of the crops and then the adventurers kind of running, and it's like almost like a shark moving through the fields. Like, how cool would that be, Ange? That's kind of cool. And then it's Dragon Mountain, so you could have, the mountains back there or whatever. So you're in a field, and this thing has come out, and it's like a shark chasing him. It's like Jaws, basically, chasing him through the field. That's another thought.
I like it. Options?
Options, right? So this is how I would do it now and show the art. I would polish some of these sketches. I'd self-edit and go, okay, what sketches do I think are probably the most successful?
You might look for reference. You might be like, oh, if I'm basing it on a shark, let me look at shark reference and see what the shark attacks look like. Is it a seal?
We've all watched Shark Week, and we've seen our share of unbelievable footage of a shark doing this basically completely out of the water. And so could we do, can we, let's give it a foot and have it, you can see I'm just scribbling literally from my imagination. Yeah. And it's coming up out of the ground. And then again, you've got your fields of grass around it. And then, you could have a player on the ground. You could have a player here. I would try to find movement with the players, and just pulling up terrifically inspiring reference till we get to that. That should be pretty fun. Very Jaws. So yeah, this, right? All these teeth, and it's kind of coming up out of the ground. And our characters are, you could have some. You can have some fleeing. You could have the fighter ready to attack. You could have them attacking. Now, it's a lot of what ifs and what would make the most interesting scene here. But I think going back to what 1993 Tony wanted, he wanted to capture that moment of it bursting out. Oh, there's a hobbit. There's a little tiny hobbit hiding there. Look at that little poorly drawn hobbit just trying to get out of the book. So I think the idea of it, I almost kind of came in, I'm looking at this kind of movement here, so I had it coming in this way.
Amelia asked when you're doing these, do they give you a particular size you have to work in?
They would have said it's a half page or a full page or a quarter page. That's it. And then there would have been rough things. So if you go through the art that I showed you, and then monster entry, but like half page, full page. I think there was some quarter pages. Whoops. There's a quarter. That looks like a quarter page to me, like a quarter page horizontal, another half page horizontal.
So you just knew how big they needed to be.
They would
on the
say
page for the
roughly,
text.
yeah, usually here's another quarter page horizontal. And there would be also quarter page verticals as well. At this point, I'm guessing they probably had done a rough layout of the book and knew where the spaces were, where they wanted illustrations and what they would want those illustrations to be of to help. Obviously, an illustration like this of a classic D&D monster would just show the excitement, the danger, the peril of this adventure.
And you get to see the creature really well.
Yes, that would also be my thing, especially if the players had never encountered one of these. So, so I kind of have this kind of shape going. So I'm gonna draw a little smaller here. I'm just gonna boil it down to the simple shapes, Ange, and see if we can. So I have this kind of shape. Almost like a wave kind of coming in, right? And that's the monster. And then I have these guys kind of countering the wave. That's kind of my...
Somebody asked about when you're drawing characters like in silhouette in their backs. Is there like a rule with that?
Not necessarily. I think it's just whatever you think. I mean, this character is not drawn very well from the back, so, reference is always a must. That is a tricky angle because you're just getting the rim of the eye socket and the cheekbone. You may see some nose. You may not see any nose. You're getting the back of the jaw. You're certainly getting the back of the ears. I'm doing a lousy job of this now, but you get the idea of the temple. And that's without, again, without any attire on, but you get kind of the idea of it, and then it's so.
A lot of the old classic painters used that, right?
Yeah, and I found in Spiderwick I would do that. I had to consciously, because my tendency in Spiderwick was to be like, here's a thing, and here's Jared and Simon, and here's the thing. I would do that a lot. Or I would reverse it and go...
Their backs were in silhouette.
Their backs were... Yeah, you're kind of, as a viewer, you're standing behind the heroes looking at the same thing that they're looking at. Or I would flip it. The one that comes to mind is when Jared's looking at the sprite. So we're behind the creature now. Jared's hand was here, and there was a little sprite like this. And he's... I did a lot of that kind of very simple staging, I guess is what you'd call it. So here, the staging, the attempted staging, I believe, is you're a party member and you're rushing in with the rest of you're like at the last of the line to rush into this encounter with this monster. So, and the monster's surprising everybody. So again, I kind of go back to, the idea of it coming out like a wave. Is interesting, but I feel like it has limitations. Let me just try. I almost have to get my head around the monster. I feel like it's not capturing how big it is, Ange. Mm-hmm. And I want it big.
I think that was the interesting thing about the cornfield one. You did get to see the scale in comparison to the...
This one here where it's chasing him, or this one? This is where it burst out of the ground.
I think the two things. Like the cornfield one, I think that is really interesting.
Unusual?
Unusual, but it feels like it needs more action. Like, could you kind of combine the action of the bottom one, like where you feel like it's emerging and they're running away or something?
Well, let's see. So based on its overall design here, let's do I'm not even quite. I'm just guessing how. I'd have to go look up how a rhino, when it's charging, what it's doing. But I mean, I know like the basic animals. That's generally how quadrupeds run. Like 2 feet are together and two are apart. There's probably a bend. So the idea of this kind of
There you go.
pushing it. See, now it's interesting, right? But you're showing it head on, and that's intriguing. So Ange found reference of a rhino. But see, I think if you do that, and you lose the fin, the whole land shark of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the fun, is you're getting chased by this land shark.
I agree.
And then the field. So it's interesting. What happens if the field's this way? I'm trying to figure out which way you do the corn stalks to show the movement the best. Does it look like it's moving this more? Now it almost looks like it's grazing and not moving. Of course, you could add like dust and stuff as it's chugging, or if you move it this way, I see it feels like it's moving for some reason when you move the grass, and I don't know why with the corn. So let's say it's coming this way.
Yeah, I think that he's definitely got to have a victim in his mouth or something. Makes it a little.
Well, or just blood.
Blood.
Blood around the mouth would help. And then I think the tension is how close do you put do you have someone like right here running where he's bearing down on him. But again, you've got the
You could basically take that same concept and kind of 3/4 it and have it running towards us.
Well, that's the other thought I thought. You showed me that rhino kind of running. So the other thing is what happens, and I don't know, I'm doing this out of my head. I don't know if I can do a shark.
I will say sometimes this will be all day. Like you'll just be sketching to try and figure out what that image is going to be.
Yeah, that kind of. Hold on. Thinking of like the music is perfect.
I know. Good.
I think the idea is you want one leg coming up and you want the fin. Again, I'm not using any shark reference or anything. I'm just drawing this off the top of my head. But that is also kind of compelling, the idea of it kind of coming at the viewer. Although here I've made them too round, so I think the thing is, what if I'm just going to make them blockier and just see what that...
Peter Webley asks, what is the music? The music today is actually the soundtrack to the Spiderwick Chronicles film.
Ah!
I mean, classic fantasy.
Yeah, it is.
Written by none other than the great
James Horner. I remember that. I feel like when things are charging, it's almost like almost all the legs are off the ground to kind of give it that. So here's like an almost full... I mean, that's kind of interesting, the idea of it showing it charging in the corn. Again, you kind of have these, maybe there's I don't know if there's trees or not, but
Susan Hammond said I could have had a couple more Spiderwick movies.
Yeah, well, you never know. So there's kind of like a 3/4 of it coming. I mean, again, I'm not using any references, just totally off my head. So I'm sure there's with reference of you had shown a charging rhino, Ange. That's probably definitely where I would have gone. Again, I feel like I'd want to have like the smoke behind it to kind of, or the dust, like it's kicking up the dust as it's moving. It's kind of an interesting, I feel like that it almost comes down to the, like, how's that shark head go?
Mm-hmm. Megan asks, what's your favorite D&D monster and what is your favorite one to draw?
I love a lot of the classic D&D monsters, like the Boule, actually, despite my kind of sketching and struggling with it today. I like the classic ones that were totally created for the game. So the Owlbear, the Rust Monster, and the Boule are in particular favorites because they were created for and up to that point only existed in Dungeons and Dragons. So here I'm just kind of, I've done my share of Boulets. I did the one for the miniature, for Jim's miniature line. And I'm not looking at any...
Dark Sword minis?
Dark Sword, thank you. I'm not looking at any reference here. I'm just kind of riffing on what it could look like. This kind of monstrous face. Yeah, you're right, Ange. This kind of thumbnailing and trying to figure out how to best capture the scene could indeed take all day. But I already think that this 3/4 shot, which if you can make any sense out of it right here, I mean, that's a pretty standard. I'd find reference of a charging rhino. Put our player. I love almost the idea of the characters running out of frame is kind of interesting too. They're just running completely out of it, so we get the giantness of this. This shot is also compelling. I mean, it's a sideways, and the further we pan out, fun fact: generally, the less peril we feel, despite whatever's going on, because we remove the viewer further and further away from the action.
That also feels more like, it's funny, I look at that and I'm like, oh, that would have been a magic card.
Yeah, definitely. That happens a lot with magic cards. Out of all of them, this one definitely, this little doodle has probably the most kind of peril because it's surprise I just popped up out of the ground.
I think I was liking that because it tells us a little bit more about the creature, right? Which is they live underground.
Yeah.
I love the idea of that surprise.
I think that the challenge here is, how do I not make it look like a giant mole that's just erupted out of the ground? But I think you had it with the idea of this, like the great whites when they kind of burst out of the water. So we've gone almost full circle. Maybe if I go back to my original wave, but instead it's like this. Here's the teeth. And again, I almost like the idea of like one foot is here, and that's what's pushing it up out of the ground. And the other foot could even be flailing, like it just flails as it comes out of the ground. And again, I would go find... there'd be a lot of bend here. Mm-hmm. And there'd be a lot of pull and stretch here. So it's actually the other leg would be here.
I feel like he would have got somebody.
He definitely would have somebody. I mean, the other thing is to have the other leg here. Almost like a bulldog is what I feel like. Because I think of like moles and things like that. Those front legs are meant for some...
Ooh, dirt and corn flying into the wind. Christopher Lee Clark says.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think almost this... And again, like, I mean, so what's the perspective? Here's oh, yeah, sorry, guys. Here's the horizon. Here's your horizons back here, your mountains, things like that. Here's our foreground. So, kind of starting to figure out the perspective and how we're going to do it. And again, I think that's a high up looking down at it. If we lower the perspective, it might actually feel more perilous. So the perspective's here now. Mountains are here. Corn's here. Then we've got, clouds above it or whatever you want to, kind of thing. And that might be more interesting. I'd almost have to go back and look at Tremors. I don't know how they had them just erupt out of sand and dirt. I know if you're a fan of Star Wars and The Mandalorian, they had a creature come up out of the ground that was very Boule-like, and it was just a ton of sand. You know, they made it was on Tatooine, so it was very sand-like. A lot of the sand was almost like water the way they did it. So you almost didn't get it. You almost would want to put these little dust puffs to show kind of movement and stuff. But yeah, and you could, I don't know if I'd have them eating someone so much as I'd have maybe showing the carnage.
The armor, though, which is a good point, because otherwise...
You're like, what the heck is that?
Yeah. Eric had a good point of saying the segmented armor on its back really helps to identify it as a boule. So,
yeah.
I mean, not just have it feel like a shark and feel like a boule.
I hear you. However, I would argue this is really interesting in a way, more than the classic boule thing. So the other thought would be, and again, here's our fighter. Here's, we have a slain fighter here on the ground maybe, and then there's, maybe the wizard's here getting ready to cast a spell or something. So how do we show more? So what happens if we take this form and we turn it slightly sideways, so that the mouth is here?
That is what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
It's almost interesting if its both feet were like this, as it's pushing itself out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah, because you almost want those mole, like it would have those giant mole-like claws, right?
Yeah, I'm guessing the fin's
claws
down
right
when it's burrowing, and then when it comes up out of the ground, the fin kind of pops out. So it's almost like this. You can even have another foot. So a lot of thumbnailing, and that's what lacks. To bring it all the way back here, there was probably not a whole lot of thumbnailing. Or if there was, I just didn't completely understand how to get this.
It looks like he's floating, too.
Yeah.
It's
a tough... There's definitely a very challenging illustration. There's no question about it. We've got about... I want to go to the bottom of the hour, so I'm gonna shift off the boule, which I think the way that ends is more thumbnails would have been required to kind of capture it. Let's grab one more.
2 questions about thumbnails.
Yeah.
Amelia said, do you ever come up with the composition on the first try?
Sometimes, but not there's
often.
no hard, fast rule on that.
I would say not often, right?
Sometimes.
It's like character design, too, is the same way. You're kind of like...
Yeah, you want to keep exploring, I think. Yeah.
You might come back
and go, hey,
to the first thing and then have explored down the path and then be like,
I understand it better now.
And Angel said, Angel Shandy, how many thumbnails do you do on average for a scene?
It just depends.
No rules.
It really depends. So, Ange, what do you think? Do you think there's a couple of ways I could go? I could unfroud that. That'd be kind of interesting. This guy's got some anatomy issues. This seems too complex. I just want to do something quick. There's some interesting things I would probably address with this one.
We're doing Hulk face.
Redo Hulk face? Mm-hmm. Just redo Hulk face?
No, what do you think?
She's saying this one. Redo this one here. The group of angry adventurers. He's got a flaming sword. That's got to count for something.
These would have been the guys that found the boule.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if these are adventurers or villagers, and he's like the hired, like he's the the guard.
These feel like adventurers to me because you got your magic user
and fighter
and a fighter, and then what's this guy on the right? Like
these look like villagers. Yeah. These guys are farmers. So okay, let's.
Oh yeah, is it a paladin?
He looks paladin-ish. Mm-hmm. Yes, I thought that too. Let me sharpen my pencil.
Hulkface does need a makeover.
Hulkface needs a makeover. All right, let me grab my pencil sharpener here.
Oh, an NPC party that the party runs into. Oh, yep.
Yeah, it could be that. Just sharpening my pencil real quick. We wore it out on that boule. All right, so all right, let's look at this guy's face. Let's let you guys get a real good look at that mug and how badly it was drawn. So looks very comic booky. They're definitely 1990s. They both actually. That is a draw the Marvel way hand, if ever there was one. A poorly drawn Marvel hand. He's got a little bit of. I feel like maybe a little bit of not only Fabio. I feel like the short hair, the kind of hair with the braids, almost says a little Willow to me. Like I might have been thinking of Willow. Not Mad Mardigan, but some of the other fighter types in Willow. There's a little bit of a Willow vibe going on here. I could be wrong. I could be crazy. But Willow would not have been out very long when I had illustrated this.
We grew up in Florida, so that just could have been a tail that dude had.
Yeah, that could have just been, all business in the front. So, all right. So, same thing. So, we have a very strong, angular-jawed dude. So I would, if we're going to just focus on the face, and he's kind of head on, so they're here. The art, not necessarily would have changed it. I like them in the field. The grass is kind of nice, kind of dramatic. Clearly, the wind's blowing, and I kept that consistent. You see it in the flame, you see it in his cape, you see it in her magic. So the wind's all blowing in the right direction, and in the grass. So there's something kind of nice about that, and he's kind of halting your path by his body language. And then he's just he seems very angry. So what would I do about him now that's different? Well, again I would push the face. He's got a very square chin. Let's see. And again, there's really no perspective. It's like dead on. So I'm gonna angle it. I'd angle the perspective up a little bit so he looks more powerful. So that means the ears would come down, eyes would go up. I don't know if I'll keep him head on, but we'll see. He's got a really tiny, barely no nose. He has a cowl. I was very into these kind of scarf-like cowls around him. It almost looks like leather armor. Give me a second here to kind of get my bearings. He's got an arm coming right out at you. If he's asking you to stop, which I'm guessing that's what he wants you to do, and he's willing to stop you with his blade.
Why no feet in any of these drawings?
I don't know if it was because I wasn't good at drawing feet, and it could have been that. I feel like there were feet in others. No, it wasn't a fear of drawing feet, because there's lots of feet in these kobolds.
You wanted the mood with the field, I think.
Yeah, I think I was more after the idea of them in the knee-high grass and the cape blowing in the wind. Like, I wanted all that drama. I know that's definitely what I would have wanted. I think the hand...
He's kind of come from Star Trek. That's good.
Oh, yeah. I feel like the hand... I'd almost put the hand more like this, more flat out. That tells me stop more than this hand.
I think it looks like he's going to make something levitate.
Yeah, or he's like, this area here is where I plan to put the vegetable garden. The hand a little higher raised would definitely say stop.
Rob Liefeld.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of... what we didn't talk about is also during this period, I would have been studying under Will Eisner.
That's funny. Went to the audio.
Okay, so we got a little bit of a rough of what this guy has. So he's got kind of a classic warrior skirt. He's got a pretty elaborate belt. I don't remember what the hip armor's called, but he's got that. And he's got some pretty simple rounded pauldrons. In fact, I'd almost keep those like that. So, okay, here we go. So he's stern. So maybe it's a more this kind of a face, stern. And he's saying no. I like the idea if he's an old... I mean, he's got a flaming sword. This guy's been doing it a while. I'm going to give him a nose that looks like it's been maybe broken more than once through some battles. Not wearing a helmet. Could have been because he was quickly called to stop. Stop. So his mouth, to say the word stop, his mouth would actually be kind of small. And again, keeping with caricaturing, I mean, you could definitely keep his eyes kind of small and slit-like, like he's an old. If I'm going to keep the wind really just blowing, I'm not even going to. Let's give him a little more eyes. But he's got really small eyes, so. Something kind of like that, where he's just looking right at you. But he basically has my eyes. These kind of. You can put a little more emphasis on the eyebrows to show that he's serious. So what I'm trying to show here is a very subtle face, Ange, that's less like, and more like, stop, you can't go further. I don't want to use force, but if I have to, I will. I don't know if that's what happens in the story or not, but that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm also making him a little more of a grizzled paladin or a fighter type, whatever he is. Again, I don't have armor reference in front of me, so I don't know if this is right, but I feel like when you raise your arm up like that, the pauldron probably lifts up as well. But this is fantasy armor, not real armor. He's head on, but he has kind of I definitely would have a couple broken looking teeth. I'm not sure on this face. I would use a mirror to figure it out. I mean, this is where I'd start. I don't know if this is where I'd end.
What's happening with his hair?
Well, I was thinking the wind is blowing it, Ange, so I'd actually have it really tight. He looks cross-eyed now. Hold on. Getting these eyes is always a trick. This is the kind of thing where I'd draw it like this, and then I'd go into the computer and nudge those just back and forth or I could flip it and look at it. Ange, I was thinking that the wind, because the wind's blowing coming from this direction, that it's blowing to the side here, so it actually would be more like this. So you get it's just blowing, it's flattening against his head here. So he's got it. It's not that he doesn't have it. It's just blowing. And then, I feel like he'd have scars. The stop mouth is weird. Again, I'm not looking in a mirror, so I'm not quite sure. Stop. Maybe I can stop. Oh, the mouth is open.
Yeah.
So you could do this kind of.
Have you ever snuck a version of yourself into a D&D character design?
Yes. Ange and I both make cameos in Planescape, throughout Planescape. I could probably grab one before we go.
Well, what about halt instead of stop?
Could be halt, but you get the idea. The mouth's kind of open. These teeth are exaggerated, but sometimes it's almost like it's a note for me, like you want something like that. Here's the other side of his pauldron. He's got the braids. And again, the hand, I'd probably put the hand in a glove, I think would be more interesting. I would definitely push. It's the Marvel way with those hands coming out at you. The thing we take for granted now is, I can hand my phone to you, Ange. I could cop this pose. You could take a quick photo and off I go. But in 1994, that would have been a little harder to do. I mean, certainly photos could be gotten.
You had Polaroids a lot.
I would have taken
Or
Polaroids.
You had a photographer friend come over.
Or I would take the photos and you'd go to 1 hour photo, have them. Anyway, that's where I'd start with this guy. I don't know if that's necessarily where I'd end, but it's certainly where I'd start, just to kind of figure him out. But he's definitely a little more. I mean, I'm trying to keep in mind that kind of.
I miss this blowing.
Yeah, I mean, this is the old grizzled version of him. There's a young maybe good-looking version of him too. I would have to explore. And again, it might have said in the art order, blah 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 with 18 charisma. This guy does not have 18 charisma. This guy's he's a high level guy. So we'll have to look it up and see what level he is. But I'm thinking if he's like the town, not the marshal, whatever they would have called the, in medieval times, the sheriff, the person who kind of takes.
He has seen some stuff.
He's seen stuff. I'd want that, especially if I'm a young player. Like, I don't know if I want to take this guy on. He knows, he's like authority figure, I guess is what I'm going for. An unreadable, like he doesn't look necessarily evil. He doesn't look necessarily good. But an authority figure. Although Witchy Poo behind him, she definitely looks like bad news. So.
Well, I mean, she is wearing a kind of cloak thing. So
yeah, she's like not wasting any time getting a spell going. So, the immediate thing I would do with her, without getting too into it, is I would just definitely I would do. If she had the hood and the cloak, it would just be this. I would do. To his squareness, the squareness of his face, I would do her kind of this points and angles, but I would definitely do the shadow covering most of her face. So the eye, and if the eyes are glowing, that's going to be that much cooler. Right? Do what he says. That kind of thing. Yeah. So this is all shadow from and maybe a few of the stray hairs kind of coming out. Same thing though, again, because
He's done a lot. He's done a lot.
He's done a lot.
That's funny.
I like that.
Guys.
So there you go. Kind of how I would handle her, a little different. So there it is. And so really what today was you guys asked for some dungeons. There was a request for Dungeons & Dragons, and I wanted to show that I had a long way to go. Even though I had been given this unbelievable opportunity as an artist and an illustrator, it was going to be the beginning of a journey, a very long journey that I'm thankful I'm still on in learning and understanding illustration. So it's been nice to kind of go back and look at these things from almost 30 years ago. And kind of like, how would I handle it now? What would I change now? So I think, Ange, before we sign off, we should give some of these sketches away.
Yes, we should definitely have a Junkbot winner today.
That sounds good.
Also, I just want to say, I hope everybody's hanging in there.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you're getting to do something each day that makes you smile, or laugh, or make someone else smile or laugh.
That's good.
Because we're dealing with a lot right now. We're all still here. Who knew that we would still be in COVID times from, back when we started on Fantasy?
I definitely think we're going to be celebrating 1-year anniversary episodes for sure.
What are we going to do for that?
I don't know. Someone asked about, have we ever drawn? Here's one of the few Planescape pieces I've kept. What book's it from? Planes of Conflict, the good book. Here's a bunch of sketches figuring things out. This is when we lived in Florida. There's young Tony, sleep deprived, some cool dudes at the bar, and then there's Ange zipping by. So there's one of the examples someone had asked.
Aww.
So Ange, let's, there it is. Here's 1995. So that's...
We're hanging in there, guys. We miss you guys, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's always a bright spot in our day, too, when we get to hang out.
Come back. Yeah, definitely. It was good to take a break from catching fish and insects on our Animal Crossing island and actually exist in the real world for a little while. So we're going to give some sketches away, Ange. Do you want to choose today's winner?
Sure, absolutely. Now, again, forgive me. We do not have that list any longer that says who has won previous junk pots.
That's right. So we're kind of back to...
What I would say is, on our system here, if you have not won a junk pot, please indicate so in the comments if you haven't won.
Okay.
And we can chat for a couple more minutes.
While you're getting those?
While I'm getting those.
I like the sound of that. The other thing, too, Ange, is... if you also, while you guys are thinking about it, and I can always check in the Drawn to Fantasy group, is Sunday over Saturday? Let us know what day works better for you guys. We did Sunday this weekend only because we had plans yesterday. Otherwise, we probably would have just went ahead and did it on yesterday.
Yes.
So lots of sketches someone's going to get today of revisits of the old. I'll even Xerox. I've got a little black and white copier here, and I'll copy the original drawings. These were so you can have some context when you show it off to your friends. And
Glad you enjoyed the show today, Brett. Happy to hear it.
that sounds good. Looking for the. There it is. There we go. Whoever's going to win it. All right, Ange, you think you got to win?
What's in the junk pot today?
We got some goodies. So you've got all the sketches we did, a bunch of the sketches. We've got, hey, get off my property, and revisiting kobolds, and trying to figure out how the heck we would draw a boule bursting out of the ground. And on top of it, I will provide, I'll plop these on the copier so you have a copy of what we were actually looking at. So you'll have those as well. So a pretty nice junk pot with some sketches. So
Jason Lotus said, do you have a recommendation for learning how to do hair and ink? I think we're going to have a whole inking episode very soon. Maybe our next episode, too.
yeah, I was planning on a big heavy-duty inking one, and I have to plan it out a little more. And Ange and I talked about it before we went on air, and we thought it might be easier to do something a little more easygoing today before I really lay a bunch of heavy-duty stuff. But I'm going to, if you didn't catch the Dragon Talk podcast, it's available on, I think, of the official Dungeons and Dragons Facebook page. You can check it out. I think they've got a link posted there on YouTube. They have it, and probably on the Wizards of the Coast podcast, wherever that lives. But we talked a lot about how I did the art for Planescape, and so I thought it would be cool to do a little bit of a dive into Planescape, because the big pivotal thing that happens in Planescape, Ange, is, the art for here that's done in this kind of ballpoint pen continues on into the art for the Monstrous Manual. Here's an example of that I had pulled. This is a water troll. But then it changes to dip pen in Planescape, and that changes the way I ink for the rest of my life. So I want to really focus on that because it's kind of a pivotal moment in my career.
I love that.
So we'll talk about that more. And some of the artists that inspired my style. But for starters, inking hair, I looked at Charles, Dana Gibson, famously known for the Gibson Girl. Gibbon. Gibson Girl. And I also looked at a gentleman, I hope I'm spelling it right, I think I'm spelling it wrong. He was a German illustrator. I'm spelling his name wrong. That if Heinrich Kley is what I always said. I think if I was German, I would pronounce it Heinrich Kley. But Heinrich also did terrific. Both masters of pen and ink, both hugely influential on me, and both terrific at drawing hair. And then, of course, Frank Frazetta did great hair. On and on. We'll get into it, but I don't want to get too off track now. But there's a starting point for you.
All right, winner, chicken dinner.
All right, here we go. Drum roll.
The winner is Susie Hammond.
Susie Hammond.
You are today's winner
of the junk pot.
Woo, woo.
All right, congratulations, Susie Hammond. Happy New Year's, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We had a terrific time drawing and talking. It was a little more chill because it's, lazy Sunday. And so congrats, Susie. Is she S-U-Z-Y?
Oh, no, it's S-U-Z-I, I believe. But,
Susie.
don't hold me to
Susie, send me a direct message.
S-U-Z-I.
And I will send this with your mailing address, and I'll send it out to you. But thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great Sunday. Hang in there for us in America, many of us are counting the days to.
Oh, that podcast link, by the way, David May, I know you asked. We can post it up on the Drawn to Fantasy fan page.
We will certainly post it as soon as we're done. Yep. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Hang in there, guys.
Hang in there.
You got this. Congratulations, Susie. You won the
Doodles.
The Doodles.
And some old Xeroxes of my old art.